There's a strange feeling many football fans have experienced, but almost nobody talks about it out loud. You can watch an entire Manchester City match and barely notice Haaland. The ball moves, the midfield dominates possession, the crowd reacts to every pass, and for long stretches, he's almost invisible. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, one run, one touch, one shot, and the game is over. Which raises a question that makes a lot of fans uncomfortable. How can a player who sometimes feels absent be scoring more than almost everyone else? This is why the debate around Haaland being overrated keeps popping up again and again. Some fans argue he's extremely limited, that he can only run and shoot, that outside of those moments, he doesn't really contribute the way players like Messi, Neymar, or Benzema do. And honestly, when you first hear that argument, it almost sounds convincing. After all, modern football has taught us to admire players who control the game with the ball at their feet. But here's where things start to get interesting, because the moment you actually look deeper at the numbers, the clutch moments, the movement nobody notices, you begin to realize something strange. Maybe Haaland isn't playing the same game everyone else is playing. Maybe he's doing something far more efficient and far more dangerous. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Anyone who has watched a full Manchester City match has probably felt this strange moment. The game is flowing, passes everywhere, midfielders touching the ball constantly, and suddenly someone realizes something odd. Where is Haaland? For long stretches, he barely appears on the screen. It almost feels like he's disconnected from the game, like a guest who walked into the wrong room. And then boom, one single movement, one shot, and suddenly the scoreboard changes. That's when people start whispering the same question. Is Haaland overrated, or are we just watching him the wrong way? A mentor of the game would tell you this. Watching Haaland can feel confusing because he doesn't behave like the players fans are used to admiring. He doesn't dribble past 3 defenders like Neymar. He doesn't orchestrate the game like Lionel Messi. Sometimes he barely touches the ball for minutes, and viewers start wondering if he's even involved. Yet somehow, in the most clutch moments, he shows up exactly where the ball lands. It's almost as if he disappears on purpose, only to reappear when the defense is already too late. In fact, watching Haaland can feel a bit like watching a horror movie villain. For most of the film, the villain isn't on screen. The story unfolds, characters move around, tension builds slowly. Then suddenly, when nobody expects it, he appears, and the damage is already done. That's the strange rhythm of Haaland's game. Long silence, sudden explosion. And that unusual pattern is exactly why some fans begin to feel uncomfortable watching him. Because if a striker barely touches the ball, the next question almost asks itself, does that mean he's actually limited? Spend enough time around football discussions, YouTube comments, Twitter debates, bar conversations after a Champions League night, and eventually you'll hear the same sentence. Haaland is overrated. Some fans say it casually. Others say it like they've just revealed a hidden truth about modern football. The criticism usually sounds something like this. He just runs and shoots. The reasoning behind the criticism follows a familiar pattern. Fans point out that Haaland doesn't dribble past defenders like Neymar, doesn't orchestrate attacks like Lionel Messi, and doesn't drop deep to link play like Karim Benzema used to do at Real Madrid. He doesn't rack up creative passes or dazzling solo runs. In many matches, he can go long stretches barely touching the ball at all. And when people imagine football greatness, they usually picture something spectacular, moments of brilliance that make the crowd gasp. So when Haaland shows up in clutch moments, taps the ball into the net, and calmly jogs away while the stadium explodes, something feels strange to some fans. The goal counts the same, of course, but emotionally, it doesn't always look as impressive as a Messi dribble or a Neymar skill move. That's where the idea starts growing. Maybe Haaland is scoring a lot, but maybe he's still overrated as a player. And that debate sounds convincing, at least until someone decides to look at the numbers. And this is where the conversation starts to get uncomfortable for the critics. Because the moment someone opens the statistics, the entire debate suddenly shifts tone. Haaland might touch the ball less than most strikers on the pitch. That part is true. But somehow, almost unbelievably, he keeps scoring more than almost all of them. Season after season, the numbers stack up in a way that's hard to ignore. Goals per game, hat-tricks, Champions League records. The scoreboard keeps repeating the same message. Whatever people think about Haaland being overrated, the results tell a very different story. Look at the consistency since his Borussia Dortmund days. The goal averages are absurd, almost video game numbers. Defenders study him. Coaches prepare entire defensive plans around him. And yet he still finds those clutch moments when the ball lands exactly where it needs to be. It's almost like watching someone break the logic of the game. While other strikers might need 10 touches to create danger, Haaland sometimes needs just one. And that's where the paradox appears. the player some fans call limited keeps breaking scoring records. A simple way to understand this is through an analogy. Judging Haaland because he doesn't touch the ball constantly is a bit like judging a sniper for not shooting as often as a machine gun. The machine gun fires everywhere, loud and visible. The sniper waits, watches, and pulls the trigger only when the shot matters. Haaland's style works in a similar way. Fewer touches, fewer actions, but devastating efficiency when the moment arrives. And once people start noticing that pattern, another question naturally emerges. What exactly is he doing off the ball that most fans never see? Here's where the conversation starts getting deeper, much deeper than the usual Haaland is overrated debate. Because the truth is, most fans watch football only when the ball is visible. The camera follows the passes, the dribbles, the tackles. But great strikers often win the game in the seconds before they touch the ball. Haaland understands this better than most players in modern football. While everyone else watches the ball, he's studying something else entirely: space. One of the most underrated parts of Haaland's game is his positioning. He constantly places himself one step ahead of the defensive line, almost like he's reading the defender's thoughts before they even react. Coaches and analysts often talk about this when discussing elite strikers. In fact, many former players, including analysts inspired by Thierry Henry's observations, often repeat the same idea. Great strikers score before they even touch the ball. And when you watch Haaland carefully, you start noticing something fascinating. Many of his clutch moments are actually decided 2 or 3 seconds earlier. Then there's the movement without the ball, something casual fans rarely notice at first glance. Haaland isn't just running randomly behind defenders, his timing is almost surgical. He attacks the space at the exact moment the defense relaxes for half a second. That tiny window is all he needs. It's almost like he's not playing chess with the ball, he's playing chess with the empty spaces on the field. And once you start seeing that invisible game happening, another realization slowly appears. Maybe the real issue isn't Haaland being limited. Maybe it's the expectations fans have about what greatness should look like. Dribbles, creativity, flair, magic with the ball glued to their feet. So when people watch Haaland, who rarely plays that kind of game, they instinctively feel something is missing. And that's exactly when the Haaland is overrated conversation starts popping up again. But football history is full of different types of greatness. Messi is a creator, someone who builds the entire attack from nothing. Neymar often plays like an entertainer, turning football into a show with skills and improvisation. Haaland, on the other hand, represents something else entirely, the purest version of a finisher. His job isn't to decorate the play, it's to end it. And when those clutch moments arrive, when the game needs one decisive action, that's when his specialization becomes incredibly valuable. In the same way, Haaland's entire skill set is optimized for the most decisive action in football: scoring goals. And once that perspective shifts, the debate changes completely, because the next question becomes a little uncomfortable for critics. What if being limited at many things is exactly what makes him unstoppable at the one thing that matters most? At this stage of the discussion, something interesting starts to happen. The argument that Haaland is overrated usually comes from a real observation. Yes, compared to players like Messi or Neymar, Haaland doesn't offer the same variety of skills with the ball. He doesn't dribble through entire defenses, and he rarely drops deep to control the rhythm of the match. In that sense, some critics aren't entirely wrong. If we define a complete footballer as someone who can do everything on the field, then yes, Haaland might actually be limited in certain areas. But here's the uncomfortable twist that many fans don't like to admit. Football games are not won by the most elegant dribbles or the most creative passes alone. In the end, matches are decided by one brutal statistic: goals. That's the paradox surrounding Haaland. The areas where he might seem limited are often the same areas that don't decide championships. Meanwhile, the skill he has mastered, scoring with ruthless efficiency, is arguably the most valuable ability in football. It's not always flashy, it's not always artistic, but it's devastatingly effective. And once you start seeing the game through that lens, the entire debate starts to look different, which leads to one final reflection that every football fan eventually has to confront. Because sometimes people expect greatness to look beautiful, artistic, unforgettable. And when it looks simple, direct, almost mechanical, like Haaland finishing another chance, they start wondering if the player is somehow overrated. Yet football history has always rewarded the players who master the most decisive actions of the game. You don't have to touch the ball 100 times to dominate a match. Sometimes, touching it 5 times is enough if one of those touches decides everything. That's the strange power Haaland seems to have. The less he appears during the game, the more dangerous he becomes when the opportunity arrives. It's almost as if every quiet minute on the pitch is simply building toward the moment where the entire stadium suddenly explodes. And that leaves every football fan with an interesting question to think about. When we talk about greatness, are we judging players by how entertaining they are with the ball? or by how decisive they are when the game demands it. Because if efficiency is the most underrated skill in football, then Haaland might represent something we don't fully appreciate yet. So the real question isn't just whether he's limited or not. The real question is much simpler and much more uncomfortable to answer. So after everything we've explored, the criticism, the strange feeling when watching him play, the accusations that Haaland is overrated, the statistics, and those inevitable clutch moments, the real question now falls on you. When you watch football, what do you actually value the most? Is it the beauty of the play, the dribbles, the creativity with the ball, or the brutal efficiency that decides games? Because sometimes the players who look the simplest on the pitch are actually the ones solving the most complex problem in football, putting the ball in the net. And maybe that's the uncomfortable truth about Haaland. Yes, he might not play like Messi, he might not entertain like Neymar, he might not control the entire rhythm of the match, but when the decisive moment arrives, when the entire stadium is holding its breath, he's often the one standing in the exact place where the ball will land. And if football ultimately rewards the players who decide games, then maybe the conversation about whether he's overrated misses the real point entirely. Now I'm genuinely curious about what you think. Do you believe Haaland is a limited striker who benefits from the system around him? Or are we witnessing one of the most efficient goal scorers football has ever seen? Let me know your opinion in the comments. I read a lot of them, and these debates always make the game even more interesting. And if you enjoyed this kind of deep football analysis, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because there's a lot more coming about the players, the numbers, and the stories behind the game we all love.